All right, good evening and welcome to the program, The Law for People and Governance here on Spectrum Television. It's another beautiful Tuesday evening to talk politics here on Spectrum Television. My name is Rachel David White, and today I'm being joined by Xavier Robert again. It's good to see you, Xavier.
Hi, Rachel. Good to do this one again. A lot of issues on the radar this evening.
All right, so this is a program that talks about socio-political issues as long as it concerns Nigeria. Then we are here to x-ray together. And a quick one, let's get to the report we're having today before we bring in our guests and we talk better. Well, concerning the just concluded elections, which we know has been in court, lingering for a while now, Hundeyin Igbo, the Apex Igbo Socio-Cultural Organization, has urged Nigerians to prepare themselves for potential miracles or shocking outcomes from the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. Of course, expressing concerns over the public's heightened expectations, Ohanaeze pointed out the disappointment experienced after the 2023 presidential election. While the body warned that a similar scenario may unfold following the tribunal's verdict. A statement by Ohanaeze's factional Secretary General Okechukwu Izuguzoro reads partly, says Nigerians are urged to ready themselves for conceivable shocks or miracles that may arise from the decisions of the tribunal judges. It also says, acknowledges the widespread optimism that accompanied the 2023 election due to the new electoral laws and the Independent National Electoral Commission's assurance of a credible, free and fair process. It says the introduction of the electronic transmission of vote was expected to enhance transparency and accountability, giving citizens confidence in the electoral system. Well, the election's outcomes left many Nigerians disheartened and demoralized, and of course also left some of them excited as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the events of the 2023 elections and how it all turned out. Nigerians had a lot of high hopes, expecting that things would change with the crop of leaders that would come in to man the affairs of the country. But I don't know, can we say that they are truly happy, especially with the fact that we are having to deal with a lot of issues?
We move.
We move, right? But people are saying, let's hope, let's really hope that we don't start missing the former president. We shouldn't just start missing, because if we start missing him, then it means we're on a downward trend that could be colossal.
Well, let's just hope on the Election Petition Tribunal's judgment, which is giving everybody's fingers crossed.
Absolutely.
Staying hopeful. All right, quickly, let's head to the second story we're having for today. This is heading straight to Niger Republic. Of course, Niger has been trending, and we can't do anything without touching Niger. General Abdurrahman Chani, leader of the military junta in Niger Republic, on Saturday had said that their takeover of the civilian government in his country has saved Nigeria from an imminent disaster. Well, this revelation came after General Chani had a closed-door meeting with Nigerian religious leaders in Niamey, the capital of Niger. Sheikh Balalau, who led the religious group, and of course he shared the information with the public as well. He explained that General Chani believed the coup was done for a good reason, according to him, to stop a dangerous situation that could have affected both Nigeria and Niger Republic. In his words,
he said they struck to stave off an imminent threat that would have affected not only the Niger Republic but also Nigeria. However, the details of this imminent threat that Chiani speaks of were not provided in the statement. This statement from General Chiani came after the defense headquarters of Nigeria mentioned that some people were trying to make the military take control in Nigeria.
Well, Tukur Gusau, the director of Defense Information, said that various groups were attempting to persuade the Nigerian armed force to overthrow the current democratic government led by President Bola Tinubu. And Tukur Gusau emphasized that the military should focus on its constitutional responsibilities and not get involved in any coup. And he criticized the reports that were encouraging the military to interfere with the democratic process, calling them unpatriotic and harmful. It says the report calling on the military to interfere in our democracy are highly unpatriotic, wicked, and an attempt to distract the armed forces of Nigeria from performing its constitutional responsibility.
Well, the group of Islamic scholars who visited Niger included leaders from different Islamic sects in Nigeria. They met with Sheikh Kabiru of Gombe, Sheikh Yakubu Musa Hassan of Katsina, Sheikh Ibrahim Dahiru of Bauchi, and Dr. Khalid Aliya, Sheikh Karibullah Nasiru Kabara, Sheikh Ahmed Abdul Rahman, Professor Salisu Sheikh Nasiru Abdul Muhuyut, Professor Mansour Sokoto, and Alaji Mele Kyari.
Well, yesterday we talked about Niger Republic, and of course today we're taking it from a different angle. And of course, let's talk about the cool threats. Well, should Nigeria actually clinch on the reassurance of the military boss? Well, that's one of the things we'll also discuss today. Let's really quickly get to talk about the, just touch a little on the third report so we can go see if our guest is ready for us.
Okay.
Well, every system of government requires leaders and officials who will occupy, well, public office and, of course, direct the affairs of the state as well. And whether it is a dictatorship or a democracy, there is a cost involved in running public affairs, and Nigeria has a critical challenge of the high cost of governance. Wow. This discourse today will review the trajectory so far in a new dispensation that started on May 29, 2023 and ends with recommendations on the way forward, actually. So we're going to look at that as well. And a proper understanding of the challenge of the cost of governance reveals a number of dimensions. That's the first is the cost of running the administration as a proportion of the overall public expenditure. What is the percentage vis-a-vis the overall public expenditure?
It's a question that we also have to consider. Is it also about the relativity of the salaries, emoluments, and allowance of key government officials compared to other workers and employees of the public sector? The second is the contribution in terms of the productivity of officials in an administration, or what the cost of governance contributes to the economy, the gross domestic product and the overall welfare of the people. The productivity definitely includes the ability of governance institutions to raise funds, to finance government effectiveness in terms of realizing the goals of high-level laws, plans, and policies for occupying public position and being paid so much. Now, we have this news circulating that our public office holders actually earn a lot. Now, are we comparing that relatively to the general budget that is meant for the public institutions? Can we say that it measures up? And what are they bringing to the table? These are some of the issues that we're going to be looking at today.
Away from that, furthermore, also we'll take a look at some of the issues today. Of course, cost of governance is something that we have talked about over time, and of course today we are definitely going to look at how it affects Nigeria, you know, benchmarked against private sectors, and of course a whole lot of these issues. Now there are different things to talk about here. When we talk about cost of governance, we have to take certain things into consideration, benchmarked against private sector employees. Well, can the remuneration of top public officers be justified? Now, the third is about the sheer number of public officers, especially at very high levels. Now, a very fundamental question is raised. Are the numbers the optimum for realizing the extent or projected level of productivity? It is against, well, this background that Nigerians question the need for 48 ministers as submitted. Well, it's even more than that. For the approval of the National Assembly by President Bola Tinubu, the 1999 Constitution demands that one minister is appointed per state. And when we add the Federal Capital Territory, it implies that we should have a maximum of 37 ministers. In addition to these ministerial lists, the President has appointed special advisors and assistants who are of ministerial grade. all these appointees will earn hefty salaries, allowances, Insta-codes, etc. What are beyond that are quite beyond the earnings of the ordinary skilled and educated Nigerian worker. Now, the frightening part of the earning of political office holders is that they draw allowances beyond what is constitutionally approved by the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission. Now, their actual earnings are surrounded, or should I say shrouded in secrecy, and this is the group extremely critical and facilitative of massive corruption in Nigeria. So they are very exposed to circumstances and situations where the abuse of office, misappropriation, and outright stealing of public resources is actually common. And then yesterday we were talking about 2 million naira prayers into boxes. And then some people were of the opinion that, well, the Senate President Godswill Akpabio was wrong to have sat there while, you know, still in live broadcast, mentioned the amount of money that has been sent to the boxes, the prayers that has been sent to the boxes of the senators. And then some people were calling it, you know, we're giving kudos to it, saying, well, what used to be done in secrecy has been exposed. At least we get to know that, oh, the allowances, the holiday allowances is 2 million naira per person. And some people are saying, well, this is too small to give to the senators. But in the face of economic hardship, where Nigerians are faced with hardship that has been brought upon by subsidy removal, fuel subsidy removal, is it right for the senators to go home with that amount of money at this time? Well, those are some of the issues we'll take a look at today.
That's quite pathetic. And then we get to hear talks like 2 million naira is like 20,000 naira to the senators. And then we're wondering, what if 2 million naira is given to the average Nigerian that is on the streets? No,
it's shared even in 4 places. You know.
that make so much out of it. And then we are having to deal, this is just the figures that we know, Rachel. We don't know what's out there. We don't know the ones that are really shrouded in secrecy.
Okay, let's just go on a short break, Xavier. When we come right back, we'll show our guests will be ready, and then we'll return back and talk to you. Just stay tuned. We're coming right back. All right, welcome back. It's still the program, The Law of the People and Governance here on Spectrum Television. And we've been discussing some issues trending here in Nigeria. And right about now, we are back. I still have my co-anchor in the house, Xavier Robert. Welcome back, Xavier.
Thanks, Rachel.
All right, so we are being joined virtually by our guest today in the person of David Hundeyin. Welcome, David.
Thank you for having me.
All right, David is an investigative journalist. Welcome once again. All right, David, we've been discussing about certain issues. We want to touch the first report that we are going to talk about today, talking about the coup threats. Should Nigerians actually take the reassurance of the military in good faith? While the defense headquarters has denied report it received a request to initiate a coup in the country. And this is on the backdrop of tensions generated from the military takeover in Niger, which follows similar events in Burkina Faso, Guinea and even Mali. Well, the junta leaders in these countries have called on the military in other African countries to rise up and take over. Should Nigerians be actually concerned about this development or take the army's word for the gospel?
So, one thing I will say is that if you read through the history of coups, not just in Nigeria, but almost anywhere else in Africa, there's never been a time when the military, which is about to commit a coup or which will later commit a coup, comes out to say, hey, we're going to commit a coup and we're giving you fair notice. We're warning you that we're about to commit it. That never happens. They'll always deny it. It's in the training of a soldier to be strategic with information, right? Which is why soldiers, particularly intelligence officers, are consummate liars. It's in their training. So if they were planning to commit a coup, this would be exactly what they would say. I know that under no circumstances are we going to do that. We have no intention of doing that. It's in their training. So I think if Nigerians or if the Nigerian government, the Nigerian establishment is very interested in preserving the simulacrum of democracy that we have and ensuring that the coup does not take place, it's not by getting people to put out statements. Right? We've heard these statements before. I mean, in my lifetime, I probably wasn't old enough to remember the 1990 coup, but certainly the 1994 coup and the 1996 coup attempt happened well in my lifetime. So that's 3 coup attempts in my own short lifespan. So, and then some other, unreported, aborted coup attempts that have also taken place in Nigeria. So in each of these instances, there was never a time when soldiers or highly placed military officers ever gave fair warning of what they intended or planned to do. And then the other thing I'll mention is that it's almost unheard of for a coup to be planned and executed by the upper echelon of the military. It's always the middle to lower ranks. So if someone in the general staff is coming out to say, oh, we have no intention of plotting a coup, he might be saying the truth. But the point is that makes no difference, because if you read through the history of coups in Nigeria, it's not the generals who overthrow governments. It's not the major generals. It's the captains. It's the commodores. It's the brigadiers. It's the middle level officers. Those are the people that we should be worried about. So, if those guys have not said anything, obviously they cannot say anything based on the military chain of command.
Okay, but
and yet, as we know for a fact that widespread dissatisfaction, then we should be worried. Yes.
Historians would draw similarities from events of years past and say whenever the army insists it is not plotting a coup or an exercise, it eventually does so. Like you've already mentioned, they won't come out and say, oh, we are about plotting a coup. Well, on the back of this, are we leaning towards history? You've talked about history as well.
Whether we like it or not, we are. We are repeating the exact same mistakes. We're leaning toward the exact same decisions, and we're basically rehashing history pretty much. So, in living memory, the only other time that not the only other time, but the most recent time that a democratically elected, let me not say democratically, but an elected head of state was overthrown by the military in Nigeria, which was 1983, when the Major Buhari overthrew Shehu Shagari. The backdrop was remarkably similar. So it was coming off the back of an election which was heavily contested, whose outcome was thought by many to be fraudulent. There was an incredible amount of top-level corruption within the Nigerian government. The majority of Nigerian citizens felt extremely disconnected and disillusioned with the government, supposedly democratic as it was. And something people often forget, something which is often lost to history, is that when General Buhari overthrew Shehu Shagari, there was actually celebration. That's how disillusioned people were with the democracy that Nigeria had at the time. So the exact same sequence of events, the that cavalier disdain for the will of the people, the electoral will of the people, the unashamed, brazen, unhidden corruption that has almost become like an insult in the face of the people. Um, a situation where the democratic leadership is sort of sticking its thumb in its nose at the people and telling people, you can't do anything. So you have like the Senate president having a session in the Senate, and he says, "Oh, we're passing a motion to allow the court to break." It's like you're mocking the people. Similar things were happening in 1982 and 1983 as well. And then you have at the time when there's a cost of living crisis, right? There's huge inflation. The exchange rate is on a runaway trajectory. People are queuing up at foreign embassies to escape the country, which is exactly what was happening in 1983 as well. And in all of this, you are seeing senators voting for a 2 million naira holiday token for themselves, when statistically, the majority of Nigerians do not make anything close to 2 million naira in a year. So when you put all of these factors together, it's this we're basically repeating the exact same sequence of events. So the only difference I would say now is that the military now compared to the military of 1983 is a lot less belligerent, because the military of 1983 I think would have stepped in maybe 5 or 6 years ago. The military of today is probably a lot less belligerent. It's also a lot less equipped because successive Nigerian governments have made it a point of duty to keep the military as weak as possible to prevent a coup from happening. This goes as far back as Obasanjo. This was stated policy to keep the military, particularly the Air Force, as weak as possible. But beyond that, yes, we are basically rehashing history. And if it ends up the same way, to be honest, nobody's really going to be surprised.
All right, Mr. Hundeyin, very many thanks for joining us again. How would you appraise the statement that the worst democracy is better than the best military regime? Should we protect democracy at all costs? And if we must protect democracy, what is expected of our leaders to ensure that the real-time issues facing the country are resolved and Nigerians begin to reap the dividends of this democracy that we're trying so hard to protect?
So first of all, something that I'm going to throw this question back at you, and what I'm going to say is democracy is a civilian dictatorship classified as a democracy because there was something that resembled an election that took place? Because if you have an election and the will of the people, which was expressed through the ballot, is not respected, and then you essentially have a government which was not voted for by the people, I fail to understand how that is a democracy just because you can claim that there was an election that took place and somebody was sworn in. You can have the paraphernalia of democracy without being a democracy. So I'm sure you wouldn't classify Uganda as a democracy. They've had the same president since you were a child, since 1985, right? But elections are held every 4 or 5 years, and supposedly the president there wins the election. Same thing in Cameroon. Are you going to classify Cameroon as a democracy? Paul Biya has been in office since 1983. Yeah, but they hold elections too. So for the fact that we hold elections, that doesn't make what we have a democracy.
So
Now,
are you saying we are not operating a democracy?
I mean, if you this is not my opinion. This is if you visit, I forget the organization that keeps track of this, but there's an organization that actually classifies every country in the world based on whether it's a democracy or it's a dictatorship. And Nigeria is not classified even as a flawed democracy. Nigeria is classified officially as a hybrid authoritarian state. You can Google this and confirm this for yourself. Nigeria is not classified as a democracy. Ghana is classified as a flawed democracy. Nigeria is not. Nigeria is classified as a hybrid authoritarian state. So if we say we want to protect our democracy, that's a very aspirational comment because we're actually not running a democracy, even officially. So, however, having said that, it is also the case that whether or not we're running a democracy, for the fact that the dictatorship is a civilian one and not a military dictatorship, you could say in some ways it's better. In some ways, because at least under a civilian dictatorship, there's some pretense. There are some things that have to be. So there are courts, for example, and the court has to pretend at least to be neutral. There are certain things that can still be done that cannot be done under an outright military dictatorship. So yes, certainly it is an upgrade than a military dictatorship, and because it mimics a democracy, you can keep it going in theory for as long as you want it to. Whereas a military dictatorship is something which only lasts for maybe a few years, and then international pressure makes them have to hold elections, that sort of thing. So we're in a very dicey situation, but yes, I would say we should still try to preserve what we have. We certainly don't want a military coup to happen. I think that's the worst case scenario. However, the people who are in power need to think very carefully about the trajectory that we're on, because when we get to the point where, just like in Niger, ordinary people on the streets are expressing sentiments that, well, even if it's a military dictatorship, can it be worse than what we already have? The military too is listening to these things, and again, it's not the major generals who are in the question here. It's the mid-level people who you never see or hear from. They are listening, and the day they decide to take action based on these things that they've heard, we're all going to be in trouble, including you and I having this conversation.
Well, David, the army reiterated its support and loyalty to the Tinubu administration, but promising to uphold democratic values. We're talking about preserving our democracy, but some persons, as yourself, seem to differ. So some say the army is legitimizing a government with questionable legitimacy, while others maintain it is endorsing criminality and corruption. So which of those thoughts do you favor, and why?
I think the army is doing what an army is supposed to do. Right? Under no circumstances is an army supposed to come out and directly contradict a constitutional government, right? In as much as this government can be classified as a constitutional government. So the military is merely doing what it's supposed to do. As I said, what the military says and what it actually means are two very different things. So it's all well and good them coming out and putting out statements saying we're never going to do this, and anybody that is saying we should do this, blah blah blah. But based on their own actions, even of recent. So you might remember, I think this was about 2 weeks ago. There was a document that was leaked to me, which was the top secret document.
Oh yeah, I followed you on Twitter. I saw that.
This is a document that even most people within the military are not supposed to ever see, right? This is a top secret signal document directly from DHQ, from the chief of army staff himself. So if military people are leaking that document to me, of all people, then that tells you that there is a lot of dissatisfaction within this. So it's all well and good.
And you decided to leak it to the public as well.
Well, I mean, it was an attempt to stop an illegal invasion, and it had the desired effect. But the point I'm making is, if the military already is making such moves, or because technically you could argue that the person who leaked that document to me committed at the very least an act of gross insubordination. You could argue that it could be classified as treason under military rules. The person could be court-martialed, could be executed under military rules, and yet they were willing to take that extraordinary step because of their dissatisfaction and their displeasure with an ongoing situation. So that's what I mean when I say there's a difference. There's a very wide gap between what they say and what they actually mean. So it's all well and good them making such things. People shouldn't put too much too much faith in what comes out of the mouth of a soldier. As I said, it's in their training to be strategic with the information that they put out. People should rather look at their body language and what they do as against what they say.
Okay, well, let's quickly leave that right now and head to cost of governance. Of course, this has been a major issue in Nigeria. Talking about 2 million naira, just last week we had the of course, the words of the Senate President Godswill Akpabio, which threw out so much reactions from even the senators themselves when the Senate President said 2 million naira was being transferred into the account of each of the senators was a holiday allowance. And of course, some people had said he was wrong to have disclosed that, while some people said he was right. But the cost of living in Nigeria today has impacted on residents and citizens alike in the country. So what factors would you say brought us to this point?
So as I said a few minutes ago, this is like a live action replay of 1983. I wasn't around in 1983, but I mean, my parents were, and we had several conversations about this back in there. They gave me an idea of what the situation was on ground that led to that mass dissatisfaction and led to people actually welcoming a military overthrow of the civilian government. And one of the key similarities that jumps out at me between 1983 and 2023 is that there was this sense within the political class that they had somehow transcended the country that they govern. That somehow, regardless of what the people are going through, the fact that I am here, I'm in power, I'm in this office, this somehow means that I'm not just insulated from what you're going through, but I'm almost like a different kind of life form from you. I'm like a higher life form to you. So whatever the people are going through is genuinely not my business.
Hmm.
Right? I'm a senator or I'm a governor or I'm a minister or something like that. So, I am living somewhere in the stratosphere has never been as high at any other time in Nigeria's history as it is now, where you have a liter of fuel making it the cost of a liter of fuel makes it such that roads are empty. If you remember a few weeks ago when a plane crashed on Obakran Avenue, which is one of the busiest roads in Nigeria, at peak time, rush hour on a Tuesday afternoon, the road was empty, right? So at the time when people are this uncomfortable, there's an economic crisis of the sort we haven't seen since the 80s. Then we're seeing visuals of the so-called first son, you know, coming out with a full security detail around him and he's skating on the road, right? He's roller skating, and like life is so good. And you can see this very relaxed smile on his face, like things have never been as good as they are. But then that is exactly what was happening in 1983. We're repeating history, right? There is a very huge disconnect between the leadership and the led, between the political class and regular people. And the political class, more importantly, does not recognize that this is a dangerous situation. The political class feels as if, well, the entire the target has been reached, and the target was to win the election, come into office. And now that has been reached, it's our time to enjoy. So, how this is going to end? There are two ways this is going to end. The first way is that there will be a military coup.
Okay,
Right?
I won't agree with you, David, but let me ask. Okay, you said 1983 seems like it's repeating itself in 2023, so the three is repeating itself. But do you agree with economists and government sympathizers who have blamed, the adverse effect of this economic crunch on our inability to plan our finances efficiently and not government policies? Or do you think, would you blame it on the APC government as well? Because if you want to take your mind back to the Jonathan regime or Obasanjo's regime and the rest, well, you would agree with me that things weren't as bad as this.
Well, so what I would say to that is, if you look at there was a graphic that I saw today, right? So it was May 2023, July 2023, August 2023. What's the cost of filling a mid-sized family car, the tank of a mid-sized family car with petrol? So for May 2023, the figure was 35,000 naira. For July 2023, the figure was sorry. For May 2023, the figure it was 35,000 naira. For July 2023, it was 40 something thousand naira, and then August 2023 is 55,000 naira, and then the bottom thing in the graphic says salary unchanged. So where you have this a situation where there has been an almost close to 80% hike in the cost of living, because Bear in mind, the cost of petrol is not just the cost of transportation; it's the cost of everything because petrol powers everything in the
Yeah.
Nigerian economy. Petrol powers transportation, powers it's behind power generation because the majority of Nigerian electricity statistically comes from petrol generators. Right, Nigeria's installed public capacity is about 5,000 that is wheeled out, 5,000 megawatts. But in practice, Nigeria has about 12,000 megawatts, most of which is generated by petrol generators. So, and then the cost of transportation percolates into everything. It percolates into the price of food, it percolates into the price of services, everything. So when you have 80 to 100%, an 80 to 100% hike in your cost of living in the space of 2 3 months, how which type of planning as an individual are you supposed to do, which is going to fix that, which is going to mitigate for that when your wages it's not even that your wages are not moving up at the same pace, it's that they are completely unchanged. So you have an unchanged salary rate, but your expenses have doubled in the space of 3 months. What exactly are you supposed to do in that situation? So obviously it's a government issue. Obviously, whether or not removing the fuel subsidy was the right thing to do, I believe it was the right thing to do. But whether or not it was the right thing to do, the government ought to have understood that in the process of removing it, first of all, the way you remove it has to be very careful. You don't just stand up in front of an audience on with the microphone and shout subsidy is gone and create a panic out of nowhere.
David,
First
have
of
you
all,
seen what is
and the
happening in
second,
Kenya?
as per
The subsidy.
well, I mean, the situation in Kenya is a bit different to what it is in Nigeria because first of all, the as far as I'm aware, the cost of living situation in Kenya is not as dire as that of Nigeria. First of all, their currency is significantly more stable than the naira. They are not as susceptible to what's the word I'm looking for now, to shocks in the commodities market because Kenya is not an economy that is dependent on commodity exports like we are. So we saw last week, was it a few days ago, they said the Forcados terminal has been shut. So that's about 450,000 barrels worth of production daily, which has been shut in. That's going to have another effect on the naira. So currently we're exchanging 900 naira to a dollar. Before the end of September, I'm pretty sure it's going to surpass 1,000 naira because of that. So Kenya is in a slightly different situation. They obviously also have an issue with subsidies. Subsidies are being reintroduced at a certain level.
And of course, it
However,
has been reversed. It has been reversed because of the, people clamoring and labor unions actually getting on the street and asking that it be reversed.
I mean, ultimately, I think all consumption subsidies are unsustainable, even in Kenya. So ultimately, they are still going to come back to have that conversation again. They are still going to have to find a way to remove it again. But my belief is that whether or not you are removing subsidies, I think consumption subsidies should be removed. I don't think they're beneficial in the long run. But you also have to accept that where the majority of the population is as poor as it is in sub-Saharan Africa, you cannot just make people uncomfortable just like that. You are going to create instability. It's not people's fault that their economy is small and that they are poor, right? It's not their fault. So you can't punish them for it. And especially in Nigeria's case, where you have some of the highest paid politicians, the highest paid political class in the world. You can't say that the politicians shouldn't make sacrifices, but it's regular people that should make the sacrifices. You can't say that you're a member of the National Assembly and they're paying you 2 million naira as a holiday token, but the regular man earning 70,000 naira a month with a wife and kids is the one who should see his expenses double in 2 months. And there should be no measures to make that subsidy removal less uncomfortable for him. You can't do that. You are creating the conditions for a violent revolution if you do that.
Well, these challenges, as they were, have been a recurring decision, sadly, but over the years, we've seen them triggered by certain government initiatives and actions. Well, as of today, it's the removal of petrol subsidy. Was that singular act genuinely enough to plunge us into economic distress? Or could it have been averted?
The subsidy removal alone isn't probably responsible for all of this, and it should also be noted that in as much as you may know, I don't believe that the current administration is even legitimate, but it has to be noted that a lot of these problems are actually carryovers from the previous administration. The Buhari administration is actually the big villain in the room now, but unfortunately, that seems to have been forgotten. now.
I
Buhari
think
seems to
we
be
need
like
a
a
day to
distant
talk
memory.
about that if you wanted to talk about that. A whole day.
I mean, I think we do.
Well,
A lot of the economic problems now are direct carryovers from the Buhari administration. 8 years of disastrous policy making. I think, for example, the crisis with the naira, which is sort of cascading into everything else,
Mm.
is a direct creation of the Buhari government. The Buhari government institutionalized the use of the naira as a tool to enrich people, certain connected people. So the forex round tripping that took place in 2016, where Nigeria had no problem with crude oil production in 2016, and there was no global economic crisis in 2016. There was no reason for there to be a forex crunch in 2016, but the Buhari administration engineered one out of nowhere, made certain people millionaires and billionaires overnight. I think that was the start of this problem because from the CBN administration of President Emefiele going into the current one, there's developed this very damaging habit of misusing the powers of the CBN. So I've just mentioned the use of the forex market to enrich people. Another thing which I think nobody talks enough about is the illegal financing of government budgets using basically the CBN's power to print money. Right? I think this has been mentioned a couple of times of recent, but this goes back to 2016, and it was the Buhari government that started this thing where there's a shortfall, there's a funding shortfall. Nigeria is not going to make enough money to fund its budget this year.
We have to
So how
print
you
and
fix
borrow to
that is
fund.
you instruct yeah. So how you fix that is that you instruct the CBN to print 3 or 4 trillion naira illegally, and the CBN governor, who constitutionally does not have to listen to what you say because the CBN governor is not an employee of the federal government. The CBN governor then listens to you and does that. So the Buhari government essentially left a ticking time bomb, I think, for any government that comes in.
so Mr.
So whether it was
Hundeyin,
Peter,
you don't think
there was
that
always
you don't think that the Nigerian populace is missing the former administration? You don't think so? Because a lot of quarters are already saying that Nigerians are missing the previous administration.
so. I think Nigerians might be missing them because Nigerians aren't aware of the extent to which they are also partially responsible for what is happening now. Certainly, the Tinubu administration has not helped in any way. They are, in my opinion, a significant downgrade, even. But the point is that these problems didn't even start in 2023. These problems go back to 2016, arguably 2015, right? So the Buhari administration, in my opinion, has set up whoever came after it to take the fall for some of the disastrous decisions that it made. If it were a more competent administration in power now, the problems might not be this pronounced, I think, but there will still be issues because Buhari handed over a poison chalice to whoever came after him, and I think Buhari is getting away with a lot of things now
Okay,
because
I would love to ask
it's
some more
like
questions, David, but I'm just looking at my time. I think we're running out of time, but we'll have to fix another, like, if we want to talk about the Buhari administration and, of course, what I say, passing down some of the problems from that administration into this administration. And of course, Nigerians are suffering it. I already said it's going to take another day to talk about that. So maybe we'll talk about that someday. Thank you so much for coming on the show, David.
thank you very
Hey,
much.
thanks, David, for showing up.
All right, back to the people. Thank you so much for staying with us. It's been the program, The Love of People and Governance, here on Spectrum Television. And this is where we close the curtains for today. We're going to have you again tomorrow. Thank you, Xavier Robert.
Hey, thanks, Rachel. It was good doing this one with you.
Of course, don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, SpectrumTv.ng, and also follow us on Twitter at SpectrumT Online, all as one word. My name is Rachel David Warrens. Good evening.
Good evening.